to shift from one environmental harmful activity to something else that is less harmful, but also that does not affect other of the planetary boundaries. Because nature is one, and nature's boundaries are absolute. So I want to raise the fact that we're focusing on carbon very much today, that what Anders said in the opening session, and that was confirmed by Susan Chomba as well, is that poverty is persisting. And that's why we really need to look at these questions as interrelated. The climate change is harming those worse off, those living in poor countries, the most, while they are not responsible for the situation we are today. But now we need to work together. We need to work together to realize these 5 transformations that we have proposed by the Earth for All initiative, and that are illustrated with the modeling work that we are working with. So we need to tackle energy and food transformation, but also inequality, poverty, and crucial women empowerment.
Super. David, thank you very much indeed. This is a very bang, 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 bang session. So we're now going to move on to the next guest. But thank you very much indeed. Hi, we've got Dr. Louis Akenji, who's the Managing Director of the Hot or Cool Institute, and that's a public interest think tank that explores the intersection between society and sustainability. Louis also sits on the Earth for All Transformational Economics Commission, and that's a group of leading economists and thinkers committed to a transformation for well-being. Louis, you've been given the question, what will we have to give up in order to achieve this transformation? And how will it look across the world? What will we gain?
All right, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I've been listening to Sandrine and David, and I must say, instead of asking the question, what we have to give up, I would ask the question, what do we have to do to get our lives better than we see today? Why? Because what the Earth for All project has done, it's on the 50th anniversary of the Limits to Growth report, it's really gone back to the root of the question. Why is it that we're consuming above our capacity or above the capacity of the Earth to sustain our ways of living? And in exploring that, it's exposed quite a number of things, and it suggested quite a number of solutions. It chimes very easily with what the IPCC recent report has just said, that through changes in consumption and lifestyles, we can reduce between 40 and 70% of greenhouse gas emissions before 2050. Now, that's a huge amount of potential just sitting in changing the way we live towards better and well-being for everybody. At the Hot or Cool Institute, those of you who have been following would know that we released the 1.5 degree lifestyles, looking at the connection between changes in lifestyles and the contributions that this can make towards a 1.5 degree aspirational target of the Paris Agreement. What we find is that our current lifestyle carbon footprints are at about 4.6 tons per person per year. And in order to meet this Paris Agreement target or reap the benefits of the 70% reductions in footprint emissions, which the IPCC talks about, we need to drop to about 0.7 tons per person per year. Now, that is radical. This is the reason why the Earth for All project is not just talking about transformation, it's talking about turnarounds. But once you start looking into the details of this, this is really where the problem is. And what is becoming very clear is that if we do not address the social tensions that we're finding in our society nowadays, we might even have social collapse before we have climate collapse. Now, what do we see in there? We're seeing a lot of eco-anxiety. We're seeing a lot of inequality between genders, between southern and northern countries, between the rich and the poor, across generations. A very typical example of this is we're just going through a pandemic. And in fact, at the peak of this pandemic, while 40 million Americans, for example, were filing for bankruptcy, the billionaires saw their wealth grow by about $500 billion. Now, that's the perversion we have in our society nowadays, right? This is one of the reasons why one of the suggestions which the Earth for All project is coming out with is that we should consider the possibility of capping wealth in society, where 10% of the richest in a country are not allowed to own more than 40% of national income. These are some of the things we'll be needing to look at. But it's not just an issue of people changing their lifestyles. It is how governments, businesses, and so on join forces to make it easier for sustainable ways of living to become default. In this, there are two main things I'd like to talk about. The first one is an approach which is fairly old to most people. Government traditionally uses what is called choice editing to make sure that we have public safety, public health, security, and so on. The point here is the government uses a certain criteria to allow certain things in society and to edit out certain things. So think of guns, for example. It's very difficult, at least for those of us in Europe, to walk into a shop and buy a gun. This is because governments have decided in the interest of public safety, they've edited that out. But in a climate emergency, shouldn't we be using sustainability as a criteria for editing in and out the options that we have in society? So what are some of these? It is very obvious. What do we edit out? Those high impact areas in society, especially those that have private benefit and public burden, such as use of fossil fuels, second homes, and loyalty programs for five-star hotels and frequent flyers. All of these would need to be edited out. What needs to be edited in? Opportunities for regenerative agriculture, for plant-based diets, and other ways of living that are more in keeping with the targets that we've agreed upon. But it's not just about editing or taking away things. It's also about finding social innovation, spurring the spirit in society amongst businesses to find new ways of meeting our needs that are different from what we've traditionally seen. In this regard, the Earth for All project is also going to come up with something called the Wellbeing Index, building on the work of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. What it recognizes, and which I think every economist or even non-economist would tell you, is that what we now call the GDP is a brutal, extractive, and colonial measure of what it means to be a developed country or a developed economy. And we need to move away from this towards 21st century measures for actually how to live in society. David has mentioned well-being. What this index will do, what the well-being index will do, is look at 5 areas where research has shown very clearly that we need to start measuring if we want to see people's lives get better in a sustainable world. The first one is living a life of dignity, so people have enough to pay to live in comfort and safety. The second one is an abundance or restored nature. This is why climate change is such a major issue. It's not just the mathematics of it. It is that the more the climate changes, the more discomfort we will face in society. The third one is a sense of connection, a sense of belonging, and building of institutions that allow people to participate in society. The fourth is fairness. We're seeing extremes of poverty and wealth in society, and we need to start curbing those and getting people on a more equitable basis. And the last but not the least is a sense of meaningful participation in society, of connecting to local communities and economies. If we do not do this, I'm afraid sometimes we'll tunnel dig into focusing just on climate change and getting a very broken society in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Lewis. That was absolutely super. Thank you very much indeed, and very, very insightful. Cheers. Good, and now the last of the Earth for All musketeers, as I've described them, because they've been really rampaging through this topic. We've got Lina Belli-Le Guillot, who is a campaign and participation advisor of the Earth for All initiative. Lina, your question is, how will you take this science and the scenarios of the Earth for All report forward to accelerate this transition?
Hi, Nick. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So we've said that nothing less than 5 extraordinary turnarounds are needed: ending poverty, addressing inequality, reaching gender equity, transitioning to clean energy, and making our food system healthy for people and planet. But Earth for All is a large open initiative, so the science and the model are for everybody to use in advocating for change. The commissioners, such as Lewis, have highlighted the need to act on 5 extraordinary turnarounds and identified 15 specific policy changes to do that. So we are going through that, as David explained, through systems perspective, which means that more can be added or articulated by others in each specific context. We think that the next decade is decisive, and the first immediate step is Stockholm Plus 50, where we expect and demand an ambitious outcome document. After that, there will be G20 and the COP27, and next year the Summit for the Future, which is organized by the UN. We'll bring our recommendations, and we hope that others will help us in bringing them too. And especially what we'll advocate for is the need to adopt systems thinking to address the challenge of our time. We cannot solve the climate crisis without solving the poverty and inequality crisis, and vice versa. So each turnaround has policy recommendations that will drive a disproportionate impact, like a ripple effect, if you will. So these are our key asks. But of course, these turnarounds challenge the existing structure. For instance, we'll need to shift, as Lewis said, our economic worldview from extractive to regenerative, and that's both when talking about material cycles, but also money. So firstly, we also ask that governments adopt new economic indicator that redefine what is valued in our society. So Lewis talked about the Wellbeing Index, which is one of the core indexes that we're working around. We also need to reform the international financial system and trade regulations so that low-income countries can combat poverty and move away from carbon-intensive development path. That actually has been a policy asked to high-income countries for decades, but we are in a climate emergency that makes delivering these reforms more critical than ever. It won't be fixed by market forces, it won't be fixed by technological innovation, and we can't rely on that. So we ask that high and middle-income countries' governments take the lead in increasing their spending on these 5 turnarounds. We also need to unlock a political space to deliver the 5 turnarounds, a safe space. So how do we do that? We do that by providing the vulnerable populations and the working majority with greater financial security. We call for the introduction of a universal basic dividend scheme, which will be financed by the private sector's use of natural and social commons. And finally, we also ask that governments support a societal debate on economic systems change. For instance, through binding citizen assemblies that will explore the best way to shift to well-being economies in ways that are adapted to the specific needs of local population. So that's our ask to decision makers at Stockholm Plus 50, but also beyond. But then again, we are far from alone in calling for a new economic system. Climate movements, justice movements, equality movements, they all are calling for a new economic system. And so are 74% of citizens across G20 countries. And that's why Earth for All starts from research and modeling and science, but then builds also as a campaign to create a wider movement. It's an open campaign that everybody who agrees on the message can join. It doesn't replace existing initiatives. So we need everybody to demand change, to start conversation about the need to upgrade our economic systems. There are many ways you can join the campaign. And so that's our ask as Earth for All to you. Today, we are launching our social media channels, and so we invite you to visit those or our website and find out how you can participate. From next week onwards, on our platforms, we will ask participants to demand change from the politicians. We will start conversations at any levels and every levels on what the economic change we need is. And we will start asking people to lend us their voices to claim their better and upgraded future. And of course, we need a crowd to support our asks. So in May, we'll publish a brief right before Stockholm Plus 50. In September, Earth for All will publish a book describing the 5 turnarounds and all the solutions and everything that Sandrine, Lewis, and David have been talking about. And this universal upgrade of a system to reach well-being for all within planetary boundaries, it needs you. So until Stockholm Plus 50, if you want to get involved, please join us on the website or on social media, and we're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Lena. And what is the name of the website again?
Earth for All with a 4.
earthforall.org. .com.org.
.life.
.life. Okay, fantastic. Thanks very much indeed. And I'm sure everyone's going to log into that and get more information. Super. Bye. Right, we move on to our next section, and it's a panel with three speakers. The first speaker I want to introduce is Matthias Frumière, who is the head of delegation to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in Sweden's Ministry of the Environment. And Matthias has spent most of his professional career in the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and is currently Sweden's chief climate negotiator. Coming in on Zoom, two other guests. We've got Christina Persson, the former Minister for the Future. Christina is the founder of several civil society networks and organizations focusing on the green transformation, and she's worked at the Secretariat for Future Studies at the then Prime Minister Olof Palme's office. And Christina is coming in from Sweden, but way, way, way beyond Stockholm, so she's not with us in person. And then from Exmoor, or maybe London, not sure, so Stanley, we've got Stanley Johnson, International Ambassador of the Conservative Environment Network and author of an amazing book, which when I was at UNEP, commissioned him to write, and he wrote it rather beautifully, which was UNEP, the First 40 Years, if the camera can see that, which we have here. And Stanley is a former member of the European Parliament, vice chairman of the European Parliament's Committee on the Environment, authored many, many books, and yes, I mean, from social media, everybody now knows, Stanley, that you're also the father of the British Prime Minister, so we'll leave it there. So let's move on to our first question. Matthias, climate action. We know from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that climate action is, in a sense, really more urgent than ever before. How does a country like Sweden step up its ambition at home, and also what can it do abroad to get the world on track?
Well, thanks so much, Nick. As you know, the IPCC says that we all need to do more, and Sweden and the EU wants to provide that kind of global leadership in terms of sort of setting the right policies in place, providing the right kind of finance, and also facilitating the rollout of that kind of innovative technology which we need in order to accelerate climate action globally. And this is what we're trying to do at home, and also what we're trying to do together with EU partners and other partners in our global work to ensure that we sort of sustain and build that kind of global momentum coming out from COP26. And now, of course, we see Stockholm Plus 50 as sort of a step towards also to COP27 in Egypt in November, where we hope to rally that kind of opportunities that we see in climate action, bringing out new jobs and economic opportunities worldwide.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm sure that at Stockholm Plus 50 that climate change will come up. It'll be impossible for nations not to address it. So we look forward to a stepping stone to the next UN climate conference in Egypt from there, yeah. Christina and Stanley, you were both in different capacities, in different ways, in Stockholm in 1972, a moment of history, a moment of optimism, a moment of the world coming together, now seeing environmental issues going global. Why today are we staring at so many crises 50 years on? Why does the Club of Rome have to issue another report that we need to rally around? Why is there so much unfinished business and the clock is ticking so fast? Christina, why don't you come in on that one first? Are you muted, Christina? You may have to unmute. Hello?
I'm unmuted.
I know, yeah, there we go. That was a mini crisis, not as bad as climate change, so it's okay.
Yes, Nick, I've asked myself that question many times. Why isn't the political system able to cope with the great challenges that we see ahead of us, and especially the climate challenge, as we have known about it so long? I mean, as late as early, I should say, maybe 1992, the UN nations signed the declaration that they should do what they could to reduce emissions in order to stop climate warming. That is 30 years ago. And then everything went on business as usual. And the emissions just accelerated year after year. And now we are in a situation that still we don't see the right kind of action taken. Not even in Sweden. I'm sorry, Matthias, but we have a Swedish